Welcome to the 2023 NNLM Virtual Symposium on Health Misinformation. We're glad you're able to join us today. I am Bobby Newman, the Community Engagement and Outreach Specialist for the Region 6 of the Network of the National Library of Medicine at the University of Iowa, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Just a few technical items to cover before we get started. All attendees are automatically muted, but we do welcome your questions and comments in the Zoom chat. So if you have observations you'd like to share with other attendees, go ahead and post them there. Be sure to select everyone from the drop-down menu when posting your comments in chat to ensure everyone sees them. You can submit questions for the presenters using the Q&A function to ensure that they do not get lost in the chat stream. We have live closed captioners for this event, and you can access those closed captions by clicking on the icon with the 3 dots and then selecting closed caption. If you'd like to share comments on social media, we encourage you to use the hashtag for the event, HealthMisinfoNNLM. Just a few words about who we are, if you're not familiar with us. The National Institutes of Health is the nation's leading medical research agency. Many of you may be more familiar with the National Center for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, which is one of the many institutes and centers at NIH. NLM, or the National Library of Medicine, is one of the 27 institutes and offices of the National Institutes of Health. It is the world's largest biomedical library and produces online resources such as PubMed and Medline Plus. NLM, the Network of the National Library of Medicine, is an outreach program of NLM, and it works to ensure health professionals and the public have equal access to health information. It is made up of 7 regional medical libraries, 3 national offices, 4 national centers, which all provide training, funding, and engagement opportunities to the over 9,000 member organizations. The first presentation we're going to have today is Misinformation Escape Room, a gamified approach to building health misinformation literacy. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and our presenters can go ahead and start sharing theirs.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm going to be presenting today. My name is Rachel Moran. I'm joined by Anna Swan, who is actually sitting next to me, so we'll probably be talking on the same screen just to avoid feedback issues. But we're here representing a team of different organizations, which we'll go through in a second. But we're based from the Center for Informed Public at the University of Washington, and we talk about some of our game-based approaches to building health and media literacy around nutrition topics.
So this project comes out of a collaborative effort between the University of Washington's Center for an Informed Public and partners at the research arm of Fred Hutchinson Cancer Center, a cancer research center here in Seattle.
Okay, so we'll start off with just a little bit of background to the project. We come, as we said, from the Center for an Informed Public, where we research a lot around mis and disinformation, problematic information, and just generally media literacy issues. So I'll hand it to Anna to talk about that within the context of breast cancer and nutrition space.
So this project basically stemmed from another project led by Chris Coward and Jinha Lee that was employed in a public library setting, using an escape room to help equip people with skills to navigate this misinformation landscape that we often encounter primarily on social media and online. This team saw a lot of success with this project and then decided to expand the efforts toward a public health setting, and then got connected with partners at Fred Hutch. And then this project transformed into exploring cancer nutrition misinformation. So we started exploring the information, seeking routes around nutrition, finding that many informational sources are usually accessed via social media by cancer patients or their friends and family members, and that these social media spaces are particularly vulnerable to inaccurate and misleading information. So you see here an amalgamation of some examples that we encountered in the wild. So examples from Facebook groups, Instagram pages, YouTube videos, podcasts, books promoted on Amazon from a variety of sources, often making really overgeneralized claims about nutrition and ways that particular diets or dietary behaviors can positively impact people's cancer diagnoses.
So we try and replicate sort of the information seeking processes that people might take. I'm sure you've all taken, if you've had some sort of ailment, you go to Google or you end up on a social media site and sort of clicking through, and the algorithms kind of learn about you, what you find engaging, and in the process of that also learn that you're looking for information about a certain topic. And so you might be more likely to be presented with the kinds of information that you see on the screen here from these social settings that come with these almost implicit endorsements because of the likes and the sort of social information attached to posts that we see on social media. It's not necessarily always a bad place to find information. You know, people also find a lot of community in these spaces, which can be helpful when going through such a tumultuous time as with a health condition. But there's a lack of kind of informational gatekeeping in these spaces. So there's not that kind of credibility that might come from a more authoritative source that is fact checking or sharing information that has been scientifically backed, let's say. So as Anna said, this intervention, this game-based intervention, was a broader project based at the Center for Informed Public here at the University of Washington that was a broad-based media literacy intervention that aimed to kind of equip people with some skills, but also just make them aware of the tactics of misinformation spreaders. To give you some examples, you know, people come and they play this escape room together. It's this collaborative experience, and they solve puzzles that kind of either talk about the emotional role that is played within misinformation spread, so how your emotions are piqued by a lot of this information you might see online, by some of the misleading statistics or misleading data presentation that you might see with graphs and pie charts, and trying to disentangle that. And since the project's kind of first iteration, we've had several more that have refined to different contexts, looking at, for example, within fandom communities, especially the BTS fandom, this everyday misinformation that people encounter in sort of celebrity spaces like that, and also looking to see if we can adapt it to other settings, for example, in the health space. And you might ask sort of why this game-based approach? What we found from kind of research within this space is these interactive experiences, because they're immersive, because they attend to those affective and emotional dimensions of misinformation, they can be kind of stickier, more memorable. People kind of tend to keep those skills for slightly longer than more kind of traditional approaches to misinformation intervention. It also creates a kind of safe space where it's both okay to fail. There's less consequence. You know, we know all too well within the misinformation space that the costs of changing your mind are quite high, and it's really hard to shift people, particularly on kind of hot topics or big button issues, where we try and create this kind of game-based approach to try and make this space where it's not only okay to fail, but it's expected that you're going to be testing things out and getting things wrong and talking with others about that process along the way. That collaborative experience for us is really important to try and kind of mirror, you know, a more social aspect. You know, we take on information not in this individual siloed environment, but it is a very social experience. So trying to replicate that in a game-based approach as well. And most importantly, it's fun. You know, misinformation, particularly in the health space, is a very daunting prospect. People are bombarded with really uncertain and really depressing information constantly. And so while we don't want to go sort of too lighthearted and take away from the kind of severity of the topic, we do want to provide people with avenues to take on important lessons and kind of an awareness of the things they might see online that may be misleading, but also in a kind of more hopeful space that may be just a little bit more preferable to some of the more kind of serious down the line misinformation intervention approaches.
And also integral to this particular game-based approach is the debrief. So this is a key component that comes after the gameplay and is led by a host. So in previous iterations of the game, this host has primarily, and so they kind of lead participants through a collaborative discussion about how they felt encountering these particular narratives or working through these puzzles together. And that debrief has been found to be a very important component. And we envision that as being important as we adapt the escape room to a nutrition setting, especially with cancer patients. So the first step for adapting to this medical space is for us to engage with key informants. So Rachel and I have been conducting a series of interviews with professionals working in the cancer nutrition space. So this is dietitians, oncologists, nutritionists, primarily who work at Fred Hutch, our partners. And then at this stage, we've recently wrapped up this, and we're starting to move on developing a game narrative or storyline that players will work through and the puzzles that they'll collaboratively solve. These puzzles will then be revised through the co-design process, which is our next stage, which is the iterative design of these puzzles and puzzle narrative feedback from these key informants that we've spoken with. So we're going to take these puzzles and the storyline that we've developed back to the folks that we've spoken with already who work in the nutrition space and get their feedback on what we'd like to change before we run the pilot testing. And so then we'll move into this eventual pilot testing, testing gameplay with patient populations who've been recruited through our partners at Fred Hutch. So just a brief description of the game narrative that we're working on, developing right now, so you can kind of get a sense for what we're thinking through. Many of our key informants told us that they wanted a game narrative that was both realistic, but also distant enough from the cancer patient's actual lived experience to not leave them feeling a sense of hopelessness. So in our current iteration of the game narrative, the players will be working at a kind of overarching, vaguely framed wellness company, promoting a new diet that their manager has suggested might be a good health behavior to promote to cancer patients as a kind of cure-all. So the players navigate the advertising landscape as they're working at this wellness company, being asked to leverage common tactics that we've observed in online misinformation spaces. So things like overgeneralizations and emotional appeals to be selling this kind of diet and related supplements to potential consumers.
So as we said, that kind of storyline comes from our insights from key informants, these interviews that we've been doing with professionals within the cancer nutrition space. And we'll just present a couple of these takeaways so you can kind of see the process that we take in narrowing down towards a game-based intervention. So through these interviews, we found both sort of some of the tactics that they found people are kind of swayed by when it comes to online misinformation, but also some of the common narratives and tropes that they see. For example, you may be familiar with the idea that sugar feeds cancer. That one came up pretty much with everyone that we spoke to as a key thing that patients had often taken away when they kind of gone home and done this informational journey through social media and Google, coming away with this idea that sugar feeds cancer, or that they need to adhere strictly to a very specific diet, whether that's a named diet like the keto diet or just avoiding a certain thing. And it's a complicated space because there is no one size fits all treatment intervention when it comes to battling cancer, and particularly breast cancer that we're looking at in this context. It's a very individualized process that requires a lot of sort of trial and error for the patients involved. And what we see from the kind of misinformation space that they might be embedded in, that instead of kind of the reality of it being a very individual approach, these messages are pushed of these certainty narratives. If you do this, you will be cured. If you do this, it's 100% effective. And that there's something that anyone can do, and it won't necessarily have a bad interaction with a current treatment plan that you might have. We also asked our experts how they approach in their day-to-day sort of practice combating misinformation with the patients that they interact with. And interestingly, they say they don't necessarily explicitly debunk misleading narratives. They don't want to tell people, no, that's wrong, no, that's false. But instead, what they try to do is more of a redirection, trying to use motivational interviewing techniques to explore that belief of the patient. You know, why is it important to you? Why is it that you would trust this or believe this source? And then emphasizing to them the available scientific knowledge or consensus that exists around that particular information they may have shared, and pinpointing other things that they could be doing a more holistic health plan rather than just, you know, take X supplement or follow X diet. We also asked them obviously to specifically comment on things that they thought might be important for our game-based intervention. As Anna said, tone came up a lot, this idea that we should keep things quite hopeful, that people, you know, when we've run past iterations of the misinformation escape room, the awareness of the tactics that are out there can sometimes lead people to feel like very hopeless about, you know, being on social media and just wanting to kind of turn off. That is not necessarily a realistic option And so instead, what we want them to do is leave with a sense of agency, that they feel like they can navigate the space and they feel like they can talk, more importantly, to their oncologist or whatever expert that they have within their team who would be most appropriate to direct questions to. So for gameplay, that's keeping things hopeful, having a realistic but not too realistic game narrative, hence the one that we kind of came up with that Anna presented. The importance of accessible language. We're hoping that this is an intervention that can be applicable in many different community contexts. So using plain language in terms that are accessible is really important for that. And again, this game debrief session at the end, hopefully our participants come in together, they play this game, they solve the puzzles, they escape the room, and then they have this debrief session. And we're currently sort of trying to test out who would be the most appropriate host for that, whether it is a nutrition expert in case there are specific questions that arise from the playing of the game or the conversing with one another, or if it's a media literacy expert. And some people even suggested potentially a librarian because of the kind of trust and informational role they often play in people's lives. So as Anna said, we did these interviews to try and kind of channel into an idea about potential puzzles and a potential game narrative. You see on the screen here kind of initial iteration on one kind of puzzle. So to talk you through it, we have this overall narrative that they are working at a company trying to sell a particular diet. And one of the ways that they're doing it is trying to potentially sell it through sensationalist headlines or clickbait headlines that people would click onto and read about a potential diet or a potential thing that they should be taking. And so one of the puzzles involved in this is this one on the screen. We see a lot of different kind of sciencey or health and wellness based images and these headlines that have been coded. And so the team worked together to decode it. It's a simple sort of swap exercise. And then at the right-hand side of the screen, once they've decoded the kind of alphabet-based puzzle, they figure out the code word, which will then kind of unlock the next stage of the narrative and the next puzzle for them to do. So the puzzle itself is then kind of, once they've uncoded these words, they're seeing the kinds of headlines that they might be already experiencing when they're in these online spaces about health and wellness, and kind of being aware of the kinds of headlines that they might be faced with, the sensationalism that comes with them, and the idea of certainty that we talked about before.
So as we're moving forward and we're finalizing the puzzles with feedback from key informants, we're hoping that this game-based approach will be really beneficial for patient populations. We are going to incorporate the feedback into game design and then eventually move to pilot testing, as I mentioned earlier, with patient populations, testing out different debrief hosts to see who might be best suited for this role. We're thinking currently, we've been advised by some of our key informants that a dietitian might be a great person to lead this, as they'll bring some of that health expertise and that knowledge in the diet and nutrition space that we as kind of information scientists might not necessarily have. We're hoping that the patient populations will not just enjoy playing a game that's a little bit of a distraction from reality, but that they'll also find a sense of community among other patients who are going to be players of the game. And they'll also come away with some general learning goals, such as being able to feel empowered to take questions about nutrition and integrating new dietary behaviors or supplements to their providers and other dietitians that they work with, basically professionals in the medical space, rather than kind of implementing these more holistic or wellness treatments themselves, and potentially even choosing these treatments over more traditional treatments like chemotherapy. So we'll also be producing some academic articles on nutrition-related misinformation and its impact on cancer patients. We're already in discussion with our partners over at Fred Hutch about how to do this. And then we're also planning to expand to future research on the prevalence of nutrition misinformation narratives on social media more broadly, and exploring the potential for these game-based interventions with other patient populations outside of just the breast cancer patient population.
Yeah, we're testing it out within the breast cancer population, but we are aware that there are certain idiosyncrasies within this population. For example, obviously, it's a predominantly female, which means that we have to do further testing when we create a game that might be applicable to other contexts. There's also a lot more research and funding within the breast cancer space that is not available in other types of diagnoses. So there's a lot of other kind of things that we have to think about when we think about applying this to other contexts. But we're hopeful that what we're trying to get out of this game-based approach, that is this kind of interactive experience that equips people with knowledge about the types of misinformation they may experience and the confidence to go and ask their providers, that key takeaway will be something that we can kind of adapt in further iterations of the project that would make it applicable to other types of diagnosis or just to health information more generally. I think that's everything for now, but we'll welcome your questions and thank you for listening.
Great, thank you so much. It was very interesting. I like the little escape room example of solving the puzzle. So I'll share my screen very quickly and introduce our next speaker so that she can begin sharing her slides. This is blocking my PowerPoint. So our next presentation is going to be on using comics and art to provide accurate health and science information about viruses, pandemics, and vaccinations. So with that, Trish, if you would like to go ahead and start sharing your screen, you can take it away.
Great. For some reason, I can't share my video. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
we can
can
hear you, but we're seeing text, not your PowerPoint.
Yeah, sorry about that.
There we go.
Yeah, it says it won't allow me to share my video. So I'm not sure why I don't have that. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it. Oh, perfect. Okay. Just wanted to have a face with a voice. Thank you all so much for this opportunity to present our work with you today. My name is Trish Wanch-Hill. I'm a sociologist by training, and I'm really excited to share with you today some what I think are some pretty cool products that we've been able to create, bringing together science and art and really interdisciplinary teams. I do have a co-presenter here with me, Julia McQuillan. She's PI on our grant. And so I know both of us will be happy to answer questions at the end. So Julia McQuillan is the principal investigator of our grant called Worlds of Connections. This is an umbrella grant. It's an NIH Science Education Partnership Award. We're in our 5th year of 5 years, and we've been able to do a lot of exciting stuff as part of that funding. So we're so thankful to NIH. And then Judy Diamond is also, couldn't be here with us today, but she was principal investigator on some previous Science Education Partnership Awards, and as well as on an NSF Rapid grant, which we received to create these Corona comics, which I'm going to share with you. So yes, we had 3 different funding sources for all of these different things. And I don't know if this was true for everyone else, but for us, COVID-19 like doubled the amount of work, right? Because it happened so quickly. We all had to pivot so much, whether it was our personal lives or our work, but also when you're in this space, working with youth and working in health, there were opportunities that we didn't want to pass up in trying to help get accurate information out there and to try and help kids understand a pandemic, right? So, but yes, so we had 3 different sources of funding. You should have access to this PowerPoint slide so you can see what those are. The overall umbrella grant that we have is called Worlds of Connections. And what our goal with Worlds of Connections is just to increase interest in network science and careers related to health. Part of that is creating emerging media resources, including virtual reality games, but also a lot of different things, activities. We work every week in a middle school working with kids and teaching them about, hopefully, science and connections. So as part of this grant, there was some funding that came out in 2020, an NSF Rapid, which is they come out, they're very fast. And we saw this opportunity thanks to Judy Diamond and a lot of her connections with artists. And so we worked with artists who, you know, you might be familiar with. They've done comics with Marvel and other things. And what they were able to create together was a series of comics about the pandemic. So we have, they're called the Corona comics. They were on different themes. And so we had one that was more general, but we also worked with some tribes here in Nebraska. And I think I might have forgotten to mention, I'm at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. We worked with some different tribal partners here in Nebraska and in other states as well, to, you know, come up with engaging stories that were broadly applicable to lots of different communities and that were hopefully interesting and entertaining for kids. I am not an expert on this process as a sociologist, but we were able to document sort of what that looks like. And so this publication right here, Hall, Diamond, Van Warmer, that sort of documented the process of how do you work with artists? How do you make sure, and scientists, right? Because we want to make sure that there's accurate health information in there, that it's entertaining, and you know, relevant to kids' lives. We also keep going. Sorry, everyone. There we go. The other thing, and this is where I'm a little bit more of an expert, is, you know, we were really interested in what kids were able to learn, you know, especially particularly with comic books, right? Were they able to retain information? Did they find them engaging? And what did they learn? You know, what science were they able to retain from 5 pages of comic books? And so what we did is we, this was again during the pandemic. So a lot of the kids were remote learning during this time. We did a study of youth ages 10 to 14. So they were 5th through 9th graders. And what we did is we had 4 different comic, like sort of random assignments. So they would get 5 pages of comics. And then we gave them a series of questions. And one of the things that was really important to us was that we didn't want to actually introduce any false information. And so the questions that you see on the screen here, you might notice they're actually all true. So we gave them 25 questions. All of them were true because we did not want to introduce any false information. And, you know, generally, as you can see, youth were pretty accurate on a lot of things. But if you think about it, this wasn't just health information. This was news, and it was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. You almost couldn't escape COVID-19 information, right? So a lot of the kids, some of the information, of course, they'd already been exposed to. So you can see sort of at the top here, some of these, you know, do masks help, staying 6 feet apart. Youth were pretty accurate on those generally. They didn't necessarily need the comic books to educate them on that. But we also had a lot of other types of health information. One of the stories that was in the comic books really talked about T cells and B cells, and that's not necessarily something youth might encounter or see on the news. And so you can see down here that they were less accurate on knowing about those, unless they got the comic book about it. So what we did find is we randomly assigned them these 4 comic conditions. And then we had, the questions were specific to each comic book. So we want to make sure that they aligned. And basically what we found is that the kids who received the comic, that they were more accurate on those questions that aligned with the comic book that they received than the kids who received a different comic. So we didn't actually have like a no comic condition. We used we used oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought. So basically they were controls because they only received that 1 comic book. After this as well, while at this time they received these comic books online, but we were able to then provide comic books to all middle school students in our district once the study was over. And so hopefully a lot of them got to read these. So one other thing that we found in this study was not just, one thing I did want to show everyone is all of this is available for free online. So we did send you made sure that all youth in our school district were able to get actual physical copies of these. Anybody can access them. We would love for you to download them, take a look, share them, whatever speaks to you. There's 3 different comic books, and it's all available for anyone to download. So that's part of the thing, is we wanted to share those resources with you all. The second thing is not completely similar to this, but along the same lines. We also received funding from a supplement from the National Institute of Health to fund vaccine hesitancy posters. So this was a little bit of a different process. What we did is we had artists, we had experts on art, experts in science, and experts in public health. And what we did is we put out a call to artists, not just in our local area. I think we've had people from all over the United States submit their art. And then 46 were chosen and created all these just amazing pieces of artwork about vaccines and vaccinating. So the book is called Vaccinate. All of the 46 posters, they're all available for free online. And we also created a book out of these. Oh, that's not right. I thought I had the book. It is available on our on the PowerPoint, which you all have access to. And if you had your phones out right now, you could use this QR code here to find that free download of this vaccine hesitancy art. More than necessarily like providing accurate health information, what we really wanted to do is sort of empower the artists to talk about what the pandemic and what vaccines mean to them. And so I think that there's such a huge variety that I think are going to speak to different people and different audiences, right? Like some of it is a little darker. Some of it is pretty ironic. And some of them are a lot of fun. And we had artists all ages. So we had youth, and I can't remember I think our oldest artist was in their 70s. So we really had a large, I guess, representation of sort of how people felt about vaccines. What do they think about vaccine hesitancy? And as part of this project, we were able to put it in our state capitol. So we had an exhibit there and partnered with our local libraries. But again, we want to make sure, whether it's these comic books or whether it's these arts, these posters, that they are accessible to anybody who wants them. And so again, they're all free and available online. And so that's my presentation. I'd love to share or answer any questions about the study that we did. We had so many people help us through all of these projects, and whether it was the artists, whether it was the youth, and then of course our team, Megan Liederbrand, Amy Spiegel, all of these folks, it really was such a group effort, and it was really wonderful to be able to connect with so many people from different disciplines to create these engaging materials.
Great, thank you. I went ahead and put the links in the chat for everyone. So if people have questions for either set of presenters, please go ahead and you can use the Q&A function and I can read them out. You can also use the chat. It's been pretty quiet. If you're going to read your own questions, I just do ask that you repeat them. Yeah, and I'm gonna go ahead. Yeah, there we go. There's some good comments in there.
Yeah, so Fred King said these remind me of the WPA health posters from the 1930s. I think they're still available. I would love to see those. I would love to see those, Fred. I'll have to Google them. Probably one of my favorite posters are the ones that sort of get at that historic element. We had one, maybe I can find it and I'll put a link to it, but yeah, I think really powerful. It was the feminist poster of the woman, Susie, or the Riveter, but with the vaccine, right? It's pretty cool.
Rosie the Riveter.
We
have a question. Yeah, we have a question in chat. Trish, where else did youth get information about COVID? Did you do any? Yes,
I'm so glad you asked. And so we were really interested in understanding, first of all, did the kids learn anything from the comics? And we found that they did. But more than that, we asked kids, this was an open-ended question. We said, where have you gotten information about COVID-19? And what we found was really fascinating. In fact, if you don't mind, I'll share my screen again and I can show you what the kiddos said. This is quite the right one. This is the publication that was just in +1. And I do have a chart in here that shows, we were really sort of, I think, surprised that, you know, some of the kids said things like Dr. Fauci. Some of the kids said, some of these kids said this comic book. So that was nice. But for the most part, it really was media. And we didn't want to assume it was going to be media. We thought it would, but a lot of them talked to their parents and their family, other people, their friends, their peers. And what we found is that the more we did a count, and that the more sources of information that youth had, the more accurate their knowledge of COVID-19. So I think that was really important to think about, is it really is providing youth with a whole variety of information, and making sure that they have a lot of different sources of information. We did not find any relationship necessarily between, like, you know, you might think if they said the CDC or experts that they would have more accurate knowledge. We did not find support for that. It really was the more sources that increased their knowledge of COVID-19.
Great, thank you. I feel like we've got the post-lunch crowd. Everybody's quiet. Rachel, and do you want to talk a little bit more, Anna, about the partnership you did with the public library for the first round? All right, were you involved with that maybe?
I think Jinhar can probably speak to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we have worked with a lot of different public libraries. The game that we originally had, the Euphoria Investigation, which was the first escape room that we created, that is generally about misinformation. That was also created with a lot of input from local public librarians. And then we expanded it so that more public libraries can join and test it out. And, you know, like so far, it's been really successful in terms of the interest. A lot of librarians shared in the focus group that they had more success reaching out to people who would generally not come to these kinds of misinformation-based programs, or they're also talking about this challenge of when they have a program like that, it tends to just, you know, reach and appeal to the crowd that is already kind of knowledgeable about it, and they are kind of already prepared. So having this kind of game format definitely helped reach like a wider crowd. And that was really successful. So the input that we got from that project was, you know, trying to build different kind of themes, right? So we're doing health misinformation here, but we're also doing one, you know, in like K-pop. We're doing more programs that are based for younger population with teens and youth. So that's sort of where the direction of the project is taking. We're doing a lot of localization. And in terms of localization, not just translating to different languages, but also revising the game so that it appeals to different kind of communities, and talk to different kind of misinformation that they are more concerned about. So that's kind of where things are going.
Great, thank you. Okay, so it looks like I'm not sure which presenters this is for. Will you be doing a follow-up study with new information being released? I guess either one of you wants to address that.
I,
Um,
I know for us that we would like to do a larger study. We did have some issues with recruitment. Our sample size was pretty small. But you know, I think everyone was sort of zoomed out. Everyone was sort of computered out at the time. And then also, I don't know if everyone else experienced this as well, but just doing human subjects research, especially with students in schools, was more difficult because of the challenges of remote learning and other things. So we would actually like to do this study again and have a larger sample size.
And then I think that, let's see. Oh, yeah. So Rachel, you answered that in the Q&A, but I'm going to put you on the spot to answer it too for the recording. When the game is completed, would the template be available?
Yeah, I think the hope for any of these kinds of interventions is to create something that's portable, that can be used in different contexts, that people can kind of take up themselves and use. But in the meantime, I put the link to Loki's Loop, which is the original iteration of the game, so you can see a little bit more about it if you click through there.
And just to sort of add on to it, our original escape room, was made available for online participation, so you can do it over Zoom. We also have these kits that you could print out and put in an envelope and do it in person too, right? So for instance, we just had, 700 high school students who came for the Misinfo Day event at UW play the escape room together. And you can do that kind of, event to that scale. Or you can do like a really small kind of Zoom session, that the librarian or another host is facilitating too. So it can be done in many different ways. So in case the question that I see in the chat is directed toward us, yes, we can do it across different kind of states or different sites. We can also do it, more broadly. So with the localized version, like the translated versions or the versions made for different cultures, we're hoping in long term to do that kind of study and see how the patterns are maybe different across different cultures and different countries. So that's something that we do want to investigate long term.
Then I have another question for your group. In creating and developing your game, have cancer patients been involved to provide feedback?
Yes, so as we mentioned during the presentation, we're not quite at the pilot testing stage. We're still hopefully relatively soon going back to the co-design process with the key informants, the dietitians, oncologists that we spoke with for our interviews. And then once that is developed and we have like a fully functioning game, then we are going to be pilot testing with patients, and the patients will be providing us with lots of feedback, hopefully.
Great, thank you. It looks like we might be getting close to the end. I want to thank both groups of our presenters for being here today. This is really interesting to learn about both projects. I love these, I don't know, non-traditional, I guess is the right word, approaches to combating misinformation, or at least more exciting than what I'm used to seeing. So I'm gonna provide some wrap-up information for everyone. So thank you for attending today's session. If you're looking for CE from the Medical Library Association, you're going to receive an email after the event, probably the next day. You can also attend the last session of the event to receive the link in chat. Our next session is going to start at 4:30 p.m. Eastern time. So what I would encourage you to do, take a look at the exhibits that we've put together that have a lot of great information on combating health misinformation. Maybe get away from your computer, move, stretch, get a drink. If you can, go outside and get some fresh air. And we look forward to seeing you at our next session.